We're here.
Half of us is queer. We're going to be talking about queer women today. And if you say anything negative about them...
Yeah. Well, that's why you're on the podcast, so that I can talk about this. If it was just me, that would be problematic. But because you are my token minority in more than one way.
How many things do you want me to check off?
How many things do you check off? You know? I'll take whatever you got.
Fat, queer, trans, Asian. I don't know. I can be sad sometimes.
I'm sad all the time, so... And I have been for 30 years. Welcome to Meaning What? I'm Mason Hershenow.
And I'm Sean Ong. What the fuck?
Is it Ong? Are we going with Ong now? I need to know.
Ong is like closer, so we'll take it. We'll do it.
It is literally your name. You get to decide.
Well, it's just a bad transliteration of my Chinese name, which does not sound like it at all. So it is Hong. I'm like, where did the H go? But apparently we don't include that. So, anyways.
Huh. So I wonder if there are people with originally that family name who have just completely different spellings. You could have relatives that you don't even know.
Well, yeah, it's Ong, A-N-G, and there's an Ng is also, N-G is like probably closely related. Also, like just have to say, like, my mom thought she was so creative with Sean Ong. If you like just like look that up on LinkedIn, they're all Singaporean. So
same thing happened to my last name, but it's like 3 times as long as yours. So
Hershenow.
Good stuff. We love it.
Go Europe. No, actually, no. Actually,
now, you know. Certain parts of it?
Yeah. I'll eat sad bread and tinned fish for you to not, like, I don't know, kill me in the Gestapo.
That's a very broad brush for a very complex...
The Nordic ones, you know?
Okay. Yeah. I'll live in darkness for half the year for a chance at being happy and having free internet.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? It's not the Nordic countries.
I mean, she looks like she could be part of it.
Why? Because she's white?
Yeah, I don't know. You all look the same to me, somewhat. But you look like twins with her. We're talking about Lucy Dacus' new album, her loud buzzer noise, major label debut.
Forever is a feeling. And isn't it, Sean? Isn't it a feeling?
How long has she been with the little one? Like, what, a couple months?
Well, we're never having them on the show, I guess.
We'll have Lucy on the show.
I talked to Lucy. I'd be terrified of her. She's like 5'10".
Yeah.
She's very tall.
Oh. Do you not like women tall?
It's not that I don't not like... That's a weird way to put that. I think that she would be a very imposing figure.
I think
she's 5'10". She's very soft-spoken. She's very, very smart. She'd just be an imposing person to have a conversation with, you know?
Yes, in that husky voice. It's just like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You brought it up mostly because this album is
a disappointment. We wanted to talk about it a little bit closer to when it came out, but stuff happens. But we wanted to talk about it because I think that it speaks to some larger shifts in the way that independent music works and what has happened now that independent music is commercial. And, you know, the last 20, 30 years of independent indie music moving from a thing to a genre has really I don't know. There are a lot of really interesting market forces happening that are very gross. And I think that this album, while not bad, right? This is not a bad album. Like, I don't listen to it and I'm like, you know, this was a mistake. It's just, it's boring. And it touches on some things that everybody was very afraid of in the 90s that we don't seem to really be afraid of anymore now.
Right. I just think about when we look back at the annals of Pitchfork history, right? And like, what was it? When Liz Phair made like a mainstream album and they like by instinct gave it like a 1 or something.
Yeah.
And it's so right. I think just like even if we like broadly right prestige movies, indie, like the things where it's supposed to be good and it's just about the art and the like lines have been blurred with what's acceptable.
Right. And because it's a brand, because the idea of indie is a thing, is a
Right.
brand, is a genre, right? Now it has certain markers that you have to hit and things to shoot for and things to commercialize about it, right?
And your parents are rich.
And your parents are rich. And I think that this album highlights that, not that her parents are rich or not rich or whatever, but like is really a breakdown of all of the things. It is a soup of exactly what an indie album should be, right? And so I don't really want to talk about. We're going to talk about the album a little bit, but I don't want to focus on this. I don't want this to be like a takedown of an artist who we both genuinely really like. I want to, but I do want to look at it as like a cultural indicator of like where are things headed and what should we be aware of.
I hate to be cynical because her work is genuinely excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before this, or at least trying something and like is a cut above the vast sea of indie women singer songwriters who somehow all write the same things. But like, would this major label debut exist without Boy Genius existing in the way it existed and their not very good album?
Boring in different ways. I had this thought when we were preparing for this, but I wonder if we didn't have Dacus's work on Matador, right? And the albums that came before this, which were the 3 albums before this were all experiments, and they all had specific directions. They had different things that she was going for, different things she was talking about. They were well thought out, and they were trying things that didn't always work, but were always interesting. And there was this dynamic situation to it. I wonder if this had been the first Lucy Dacus album, right? If this was the thing that defined her, if we would feel differently about it, right? If this was a starting point and then she went on to do Historian, right? Like that level of growth and that level of experiment, like that would be amazing. And this album would feel very different, right? It would be
just a little generic debut.
Right. A thing to get her foot in the door, or a songwriter who was not pushing her boundaries yet, right? And so I think that part of because this is not an objectively bad album, right? It's just a boring album. And part of what is missing is that experimentation, which, as we talked about in an earlier episode, was also missing on the Boy Genius album too, of like what happens when you are trying to reach and keep an audience and trying to give them exactly what they are looking for, because that is what this album does. This is an album to get the fans excited who are interested in the fact that Lucy Dacus and Julian Baker are dating.
Yay! Gay! Is the funniest thought of her, like, Lucy Dacus then bursting into Born This Way as a guy. Like, I'm gay now, officially! I think her last album talked about being queer. But anyway, it's like... that a different major label and a different time would make her make that happen. Oh my god! Like think about the early 2010s.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and the whole tabloid scene would be totally different, and I don't know, like I can't like she would have been a kid at that time, right? And that's the world she grew up in. And she's talked a lot about like her own journey, her own personal journey, and has been very vocal about like that shift and that figuring that part of herself out in a way that I have not seen from her other fellow boys, right?
Yeah.
With Bridgers, it's always a little bit more of a question of is it part of her brand? And with Baker, it's always been core to her identity as a singer-songwriter, right? She's always been
Yes.
very openly gay, in addition to being very openly Christian, right? And
Yes.
one of the things that also made Dacus so interesting for me was that she was always questioning those things too, right? She was on this journey, right? And she talks about coming from a very conservative background and coming from being adopted by a religious family and like having all of that and growing up that way and then questioning those things. And so there's an arc to her life. And so you would hope that when we land here, right, you would have that like it would be building on all of that. And I don't know. Do you feel like it is accomplishing that as the resident queer of this podcast?
It. Who cares about whether or not it's gay? Post gay rights gay. That's a bleak statement.
That's the correct answer, though, right? Like it shouldn't matter. And
It shouldn't
the
fucking
fact that
matter.
we're talking about all of this is troubling on the surface, but it's also how all of this is sold. So, like,
Right. Yeah. I think my biggest I think you like got at like my biggest problem at it is like most songwriters like have the like their core thesis, the best mode within which they operate. There's a specific way, and for Miss Dacus, it is yearning, searching, uncertainty bubbling underneath, and she's just like, I'm here and I'm in love. And I'm like, maybe you being happy is not the best for making music.
I don't think that's fair because there's a lot of joy in her other albums as well, as much as there is lack thereof. I think for me, one of the things though that is maybe dovetailing into that is out of the three boy geniuses, she's always been the most academic, right? She's detached, which makes her so interesting in this field of indie folk songwriters that are focused entirely on personal experience, right?
Right, or like the most direct expression of self-truth.
Right. Her autobiography comes with this sort of step back, looking in and writing and thinking about it. She's coming from a place of thought where Baker always feels a little bit more emotionally raw in a way, and Bridgers is like myth making, you know? Like Dacus is very, very poetic in like a classical way and very literary. And that's another thing that this album doesn't seem to quite be doing, right? She's swapped that out and now she's in it, right? And there are moments where it gets very literary that feel very cold. But when that's not there, it also feels very much like it's missing. And where Baker might be like doing some very raw thing, right? Or Bridgers would be going off on some wild metaphor, right? Dacus is talking about these very real emotions and these very intense things, and she's doing it mid-tempo and in almost a monotone, right?
Right. It's almost like she has been. It's hard to not feel cynical and feel like the major label shaped some form of the direction of the album, and it's going against her ability to provide, for lack of a better term, excitement from her detachment, and is like, you need to do what in the indie white girl playbook is like emotionally raw Taylor Swift, but hopefully slightly better written. Oh my god, I managed to include her in this. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, all right, white chick that's famous for indie music, follow the playbook.
Right. Which is exactly what a major label would want, right? Because they have to sell it. And you can't experiment. And as we were talking before we got on mic, like, that is what has been so exciting about Dacus's work up to this point, is that it was always experimental. It was always pushing it. There were always different and wild things. Yeah. My favorite part, I mean, I really, really love her second album, Historian, a lot. It's one of my favorite albums of the last 20 years. And the opening with Night Shift is just a great breakup song. But my favorite part are the two songs in the middle that are in 3/4. We have a waltz, and then we have Time Fighter, which feels Four on the Floor-esque, but it is in 3/4, and it is massive, and it's this creative thing. And there are moments on home video that feel similar, where I think that one was a little bit more in the realm of her literary songwriting and this reflection on the life that she grew up. But that was the concept. Let me look back at my own life. Yeah, and look at it as a, to borrow the title of the previous album, a historian of my own experience and reflect on it. And what Forever is a Feeling is a thing that is difficult to look at and talk about because it is so blankly exactly what it is, right? It is an autobiography about her love affair with Julian Baker. And it doesn't feel like it's anything, and the collapse of her relationship, of Dacus's relationship with another bandmate, and it doesn't feel like it's anything more than that, right? And so then it's like, well, then who is this for? What would a major label want? That becomes a very obvious question to ask. And the thing that would sell to all of these kids that are obsessive about these artists is, hey, give me all the tabloid details on your relationship, right? Give me all the down and dirty and all of the stuff that you shouldn't have to talk about. But this album keeps touching on that stuff, and it feels almost uncomfortable sometimes because I don't know if I need to know this. I don't know if it needs to be out there, and it's her right to share it, and it's her craft. But it's why,
Also, if I put on my executive marketing hat, which everyone does, how does this build a new audience? It's just circle jerking off her current audience? Question mark?
That's a really interesting question, right? Who is this album for, right?
If we're going to be cynical and make a marketing angle for it, ¿por qué?
Well, because you have to. And when you make an art piece, you have to ask yourself, who is the audience? Who am I sharing this with? Who am I trying to reach, right? And everything points back to the people that already enjoy her music, right?
Yes.
There's no point in the album which her previous albums did, right, where they were very her, and then there were moments that were this is who I am, but look what else I can do, right? But, you know, like Julian Baker and Phoebe Bridgers are both on this album as well.
Of course.
You know, Hosier is also on it. And their duet is really lovely. A very nice breakup song. And adds a little bit of, I forget how good he actually is, you know, but like adds a little bit of a more emotional rawness and toward the end of the album. But there's no big surprises. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's almost more because we hope for that for her.
Right.
Because we respect her as an artist. We want it better for you.
And so do most of her critics, it appears, right? This is pretty middling, generally favorable reviews, lots of like 3 stars. And
this is fine.
Yeah. This is all right. I enjoyed the Pitchfork review for this one.
Yeah.
Which was basically like, it was like a 6.1, and the reviewer was like, you know, she talks and talks and talks and talks about wanting to like devour her lover and wanting to scream at the top of her lungs about how in love she is. So why doesn't she?
Yeah.
And I felt like that really encompassed.
Like Lucy Dacus, take a page from like Phoebe Bridgers' book and just scream.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Do it.
Just end an album just shrieking. Why not?
The primal female scream. Also just like the sad stunt marketing of the open call for her music video. Eye roll.
I want you to talk about that a little bit. I think that for some obvious reasons, your opinions might be a little bit more prescient about like why that.
It was like, okay, kind of cute. Let's open. It was an open call for masks. Great. And then when you get to the music video, like, you know, everyone hates to be like that, but it's also like, okay, so it's all the famous, slightly sort of butch people that we know in music already, or the same like 3.5 models, and no one is above a size 8. Okay, what did this accomplish? Like, what is this open call for the same 12 models that we always see?
Did they shoot it in L.A.?
Probably,
because I wonder
they live in L.A.
Yeah, and I wonder if that was part of it. Of like, had she done this in Virginia, right? And
would have been much more interesting
in Richmond or in Philadelphia, right? If it would have at least gotten some different people, and at least not Cara Delevingne or whatever her name is,
Otoa Bird from Hot Masks is how they described it. I thought they also said like you can be from wherever. That was the thing, and it was pretty like, well, that's not true.
Yeah, but if you're doing it in LA, you're going to get LA people. And if you do it in Richmond, you're mostly going to get Richmond people. And if you do it in Philly or in Washington, D.C. or in wherever, right? Like, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about some wider implications about this whole thing. Because I think that there's a conversation to be had there.
Dun, dun, dun.
Sam at 9000 here, meaning what is brought to you by the fine people who are Mason Hershenow and Sean Ang. That's right, this is an entirely self-funded homemade operation, and what's more American than that? If you enjoy what we do, please leave us a like, rating, and review wherever it is that you get podcasts. It helps a lot and is the only way we will ever escape obscurity and finally reach the Lucy Dacus levels of success we are destined for. American Dream. Apple pie. If you can't do that, then at very least tell your family, friends, and enemies about this podcast. At least one of them must respect you enough to listen. Let's find out who. Okay, back to the show.
Hey, Sean, do you remember when it wasn't cool to sell out?
Um, this is such a mean answer. Yeah, wasn't that the early '90s, aka when I was born?
I was also born in the earlier 90s, but I remember the 90s, so.
I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I do.
Yeah, but yes, reaching back in the annals of history, the ancient texts. Yes, I do remember those days, and I feel like does selling out really exist anymore?
Selling out is the goal,
Yeah.
right? Like getting a brand deal and
Oh God, that's so
Yeah.
bleak because that's every startup's goal, right? Is to get sold to Google for $3 billion. So is everyone treating their artistic careers like that now too? That's really sad.
well,
Anyways,
you have to, right? Like to make it
Ugh.
sustainable. If you would like to advertise on this podcast, please reach out to us via email. You can or on the contact sheet on our website, and we would love to have you if you're going to pay us, please. Also, we're on Substack, so go read that. Links in the description.
Yeah, read our really great writing. Thank you very much.
Like and subscribe and review, please.
Tell all of your friends. Hold them at gunpoint until they listen to at least about 2 episodes.
Well, yeah,
Metaphorical.
metaphorical.
It's a metaphor.
This is not a pro Second Amendment podcast, but
No one should have gun.
no, nobody should have a gun. I'm okay standing by that. We just lost. We gained one listener, and then they heard that, and they were like, "Fuck, liberal queers," and then they left.
Oh, sorry. I'm sad.
I'm not. I'm gonna die in obscurity, and I have to be okay with that. So, I think about this a lot, right? And it's just a weird thing. It's a weird time to be alive and to have seen that shift. And I teach high schoolers, and so they have a very different culture than I do. But a lot of them don't see, like, selling out is not a thing that's talked about in the same way, right? That is the goal. You get the brand deal, you get the
Right.
advertising. You have a connection with BetterHelp or PepsiCo or whatever, and like, they fund your influencer lifestyle, which is a fiction in and of itself. And there's all sorts of people online who will talk about how very little money they actually make as influencers, and that's a whole
etc.
Right.
The money's gone, basically.
The money's gone. Logan, the Paul brothers, and Mr. Beast took all of it, and now it's all Patreon or whatever, and that's drying up too. And the bigger conversation about this, about Lucy Dacus's recent album, is I think this question of what happens when you have that success, right? I didn't grow up listening to punk. I got into punk later as an adult, right? But the ethics of punk has always been very fascinating to me, and the complex relationship it has with the music industry at large, right?
Right.
One of my favorite stories, and I'm not an expert on this by any means, but like the Sex Pistols were a commercial band, right? Like and a lot of young punks will look toward them before they have any real taste, and they were created to help sell clothing, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and a look. So there's always been this thing, and we shouldn't like lie to ourselves about like there was a better time when anarchy reigned or whatever, but like at least there was a fiction about wanting to make art for the sake of art. But that was also at a time when you could buy a house on a regular single income. So is this...
Here we are.
Here we are. Is this an aspect of our culture? Is this an aspect of like end stage capitalism? Is this an aspect of social media culture and the need to constantly be selling and being in front of people and being building an audience, right?
Right. Yeah, yes, duh to all of it. But I feel like it even has bled and infected like the quote unquote pure aspects of music and celebrity building as a musician. It I mean, less so for Lucy Dacus's fans, but like for most musicians and loosely air quotes fans, like it's so the fandom culture is so metatextual. Like, why did she release it like this? Why didn't she just do these two singles? Blah 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 blah. This album era would have been so much more successful. And you're like, why are we consuming the music as though we're a studio executive?
That's
What
really
the fuck
good.
are we doing here?
That's a really good point, right? And like we run into the danger of doing that a little bit here too, right? Like,
Yeah, but we're smart and we have taste and we're better than you.
okay, I wasn't gonna go there, but yeah. But also like everybody is a critic in a way that hasn't ever really been true, right? And when you
Right.
put it online, there is that like need for tribalism and that need for being an expert in a space. And how do you do that? You talk like Pitchfork in 2010, right? Like that's how you make it happen. But it is true. And like as somebody who listened to this album as a fan of the artist, like well, I can have that conversation separately too of like this isn't what I'm looking for from this person, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make it any less legitimate, but like separate of all of it, whether if this had come out on Matador, I would have still been like,
Been pretty disappointed and in fact almost even more baffled.
yeah,
Like
who told you this was a good idea? Now there's the cynical view of all of the old men in a room, to quote her on her own album, talking about how to sell this thing. And there's also a cynical view of like, is it possible that for us to continue having Lucy Dacus albums, she has to do this, right? Like,
yeah.
for her to continue having a career as a musician in the modern world, this is the kind of album that she has to make,
Yes.
right? Which is such a counterpoint to the second Ethel Cain album, which was exactly the album that you don't make if you want to continue your career.
Props to her.
Right. But there is something bleak there as well, right? Like, is this what makes it sustainable? We don't know how much money she makes. We don't know what kind of lifestyle she leads, right? Like,
right.
This could just purely be the right decision career-wise. And
yeah.
And to succeed as an artist, you have to make those sacrifices.
Which makes it all the more refreshing when you find artists that don't do so, essentially.
Absolutely. Right.
How many albums? Mitski reference incoming. But I'm sorry. But like she openly talked about it on our last tour when I was there. That like she is blessed with the opportunity to like get to make a comfortable living off of music, and she also like fucking disappears into the woods in between each album. And she's still on Dead Oceans, I think.
I believe so. Yeah,
I believe so. And the last few albums have been more so experimental in a way that is less trying to be broadly appealing.
Yeah.
In fact, it's the older album that went viral on TikTok, ? That is the one thing I'm glad that we did not have to see a Lucy Dacus TikTok-friendly song. Because, oh my God, would that be awful.
I'm surprised that there isn't, like, it didn't happen anyway. Not that I'm, like, I wouldn't really know. Not firsthand, at least.
Time around the sun, and I'll be the night shift.
It's too bad we can't afford to pay anybody to help us with this, because that moment right there would have been exactly why a video podcast would be.
I just did the best TikTok dance you've ever seen in your life to Night Shift.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for my check.
Somebody come work for us for free. We're not making any money either, so that's okay. That's what makes it okay.
We'll profit share when we make those $3.
Yeah. You can have
$1.
one of those dollars. Thank you. My math was not mathing.
After tax, so really like 65 cents.
You don't have to pay tax on $3. Don't tell the interns that, though. Amy Mann comes to mind, right? As a previous generation independent female artist who had massive success with her one-hit wonder with Till Tuesday in the 1980s, had success as a solo artist, did the soundtrack for Magnolia, right? Like, and then founded her own independent music collective. And by then she had already had commercial success, and so she could branch out and do things, and she was married to Sean Penn's brother and all of that, right? Like, that aside, and that's a big aside, right? The fascinating thing about Amy Mann is that we have 30 years of music from her where this doesn't happen, right? Like, she went independent before indie music was really a thing in the current consciousness, before it became a genre. She laid the groundwork for that genre, right? In a lot of ways.
Yes.
And then she just keeps doing different things. All of her albums are very Amy Mann, but there's lots of experimentation. Her from Lost in Space, which is all of this like atmospheric, electronic almost stuff, and then you get The Forgotten Arm, which is a rock opera about a boxer. Like, you know, she did a whole album about manic depression and mental illness. Like, it's great. In a very different approach. You see it with like Nico Case and the New Pornographers as well, who are sort of the same generation. And also, like, the New Pornographers are one of those bands that have influenced people that you are influenced by, right? And like, they're still putting out music that's still very New Pornographers-esque, but is still like, there's not real commercial appeal for it, and it's not going to be huge, but they're doing it, right? And so we have a blueprint for how this can work, and there's a question of like, do those people only get to do what they're doing because they already succeeded, right? Because
Probably
they had that, and so they don't have to worry about TikTok. But I don't, to have them talk about it, like, the shifts in the music industry aren't very helpful to them either. So,
right. I feel like their legacy and the legacy of what we broadly expect the Western artists, like, myth making of a musician, right? Because it used to be that what would be an indie artist today, because they are giving their personal truth every album, was a major label artist, or like, at least it seemed so, right?
Yeah.
So that legacy bleeds into what we expect out of Western music. And then, so that's the inherent tension of what we expect out of an indie artist, is we expect the truest self, but also that doesn't fucking happen anymore.
Right.
So then it becomes this metatextual, but we also still kind of expect it. But also, yes, what's your marketing angle? So the core of the issue, I guess.
Yeah, and like the Amy Manns and the Nico Cases and the
New
Pornographers and the Destroyers, and like all of the indie artists of that time were writing. Amy Mann especially comes to mind, like very personal albums about her own experiences, but done in metaphor and not autobiographical in this way. If you look up interviews with her, she'll talk about like what influenced what, but there is that separation that you can't do if you're trying to succeed today, right? Lucy Dacus has to make this album because you get in people's feeds by being overly available. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. Which is the like somehow our way that we've commodified in modern post influencer culture, how being a musician works. Essentially, I don't know. I'm trying to get at something here.
I a few months ago I saw Colin Malloy of the Decemberists. He did a couple of solo shows and he played Menlo Park, which is about an hour from me, at this really cute little theater. It was just him and a guitar. And he was recovering from vocal surgery, and so he's doing a couple of shows to like warm up before they do another Decemberist album and tour. And it was really interesting being in that room. I've seen the Decemberists a couple of times. This is the first time I'd ever seen him on his own, and it was a very mixed crowd. There were people my age. I was there with my dad. There were people his age. And there were younger people. And the worst behaved people were, of course, the youngest people in the audience for the most part. But people were like, it was a small room and people were shouting and having trying to have a conversation with him and calling out requests and stuff in a setting, like we're in a theater. We're not like at a coffee shop or something. And he was very vocal about like,
shut up.
This is my show. This is not cool. This is not how this works. And he made a joke at some point about how like I was too nice to you, and now you're taking it too far. And when somebody asked him what was on his sweater, I was like, let me fucking play. This is not a conversation. And
that's and that's like the biggest for worse, actually, the biggest issue with post influencer culture is that at least before, people of importance and celebrities, we always had a degree of separation, and like that was part of the joy and the mystique of it, that we had at least even a facade of it, right? Like Golden Age Hollywood, we all knew every single bit of their story. There was at least a facade of the mystery of the myth. And now we expect the truth, but also we expect to know what you had for breakfast this morning.
Right. And I don't know that the myth making and the demagoguery of the celebrity is the right answer either, right? Like they are just us with more success. And if we want to have a conversation about talent, we can have that conversation separately. But there's also like a way to conduct yourself in public too, right? Which gets lost when you don't have that class stratification, right? If the other person in the room is not better than you, right? You have to, it becomes a conversation of how you treat your peers. And because we do not respect our peers as a culture.
Yikes.
Right? We don't know. And also, like, this is a hangover from the Twitter sphere of, like, how you talk to celebrities and how they are just one of us, but also, like, everyone is my friend, right?
Right.
There are a whole lot of things going into this. I don't know that stratification is right. I would say that that's inherently bad as well. But there is, and I do not support that, and I'm not coming out in support of that. But there is a real thing to note here of how that has changed. And I think that is part of it, right? Like, we don't go in awe. We're not in a room in awe of this other person. We're in a room, and it is about us. When I saw Kathleen Edwards, there was a woman who was shouting. That was in an even smaller room, right? This tiny little bar. And there's a woman that was just shouting things like we were in her living room, right? And she's like yelling requests and like, I saw you at the, and like,
okay,
woman, you are too old to be acting this way. But like, everything has flattened, and here we are.
What a delight. Isn't it fun?
And so now, to be commercially successful, you have to do that. But also by doing that, you are furthering and supporting a system that is not good for anybody. So what is the solution? What do we do? Is there anything that we can do? Or is this just the world that we live in and we just have to wait until nuclear fires wipe us all out?
Somehow it always comes back to how you consume
Yeah.
like work around you. And it's like, I think our answer is always be informed, bring your sense of like your opinions and your taste to it, but also just like have some fucking manners, and also have some like I have some respect for the process, even though the process itself doesn't really respect it anymore. Right? Respect that it is that it is a work, and like that it's more important to engage with the work rather than the shit around it.
Yeah. And maybe there's an argument here too, on top of that, or in addition to that, that we need to place making higher in our society, and that people need to be making art for fun, right? And just, or doing something creative for fun, so that they can understand that, right? No one wants to be a rock star anymore. And so nobody like understands
Nobody.
at least when you are doing that, you are understanding what it is like to make music, right? But if the goal is not to make a thing and it is to sell out and get that brand deal, then it becomes much harder to understand where that creator is coming from.
My favorite Lucy Dacus moment, because we've not been kind to her, is still when Obama tweeted Boy Genius's song on his not his own made song of the summer list, and she was like, war criminal type thing. Oh,
Right.
I almost wish I was famous just to have that moment. Just once.
I know.
Please.
You know, it was like when Phoebe Bridgers tweeted back to Crosby, fuck you, or whatever it was.
Yes, Crosby from Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Yeah.
Yes, because it was like, shut up. What
Shut
the
up,
fuck?
dude. Well, in addition to Lucy Dacus, what else are you listening to? Anything?
Why would I listen to music?
Yeah, seriously. What else are you consuming, consumer?
I am actually listening. Do you listen to Robin at all? I feel like that is not your universe at all.
Not my style, but I am familiar with. But not really my.
Yes. Her
my
magnum
kinda gig.
opus 2009 album Body Talk. And there is more bangers besides Dancing on My Own. But yes.
I've been really into the Beths lately.
Oh yes, I love them.
Expert in Dying Field.
Die a little death.
Somebody,
that was not her accent at all.
No, not at all. It could not have been further from. Somebody suggested Expert in a Dying Field to me, and I listened to it, and it is very lovely. I also recently listened to The Knife again. Do you remember The Knife?
Oh,
Swedish electronic. I think they're from
yes. Oh wow.
Talk about weirdness.
Do they have anything out recent?
I don't think so. Well, maybe they put an album out a couple of years ago, but
2017.
I picked up their album Deep Cuts, which is where everything that you've heard from The Knife is on, from 2003, and I can't listen to it more than like one or two songs in a row, but man, there's nothing like that sound. Yeah, so I guess there you go. Pick up a Robin record, pick up something by the Beths, pick up Deep Cuts by The Knife, and
electronic music. We have to dance while the world's on fire, right?
That's right. And if electronica is not your forte, then the only option that you still have left to you is pirating Metallica.
It's no Sam Studios.
Well, actually,
Did I stutter?